Well, good evening, everyone. Happy Black History Month. My name is Alexa Gilmour. I am your MPP for Parkdale High Park, and I am so glad that you're joining us tonight because tonight we have a panel of experts with tremendous wisdom, tremendous stories, tremendous heart to share. And so I can't wait for you to hear from them. In fact, I am not going to do the majority of the speaking. I am going to leave it to these incredible leaders who are with us tonight. And I'm going to introduce them to you in a moment, but I want to start us in a good way. I want to acknowledge that the land that, at least that I am on, and I hope that you'll acknowledge the land that you are on for thousands and thousands of years, has been the traditional territory of many nations, long before my ancestors and many of your ancestors got here, long before the British, beaucoup plus avant les Français, les terres sur lesquelles nous vivons sont partie de la territoire traditionnel de Huron-Wendat, de Petun, de Seneca et plus récemment du Mississauga du Credit. Et ce terre fait l'objet du traité de la ceinture wampum. Fait référence au concept d'une seule boule et une cuillère entre la Confédération iroquoise et les Ojibwés et les nations alliées pour partager et pacifiquement partager et préserver les ressources, surtout pour tout le Grand Lac. And we are really mindful of broken covenants, of broken treaties, and of the responsibility that we have to truth and reconciliation. And today, I think in particular, because of Black History Month, but every day, because each one of us has a responsibility, we're also mindful of the healing and the reparations needed to those who came here involuntarily. Particularly those brought to these lands as a result of the transatlantic slave trade and slavery. And we pay tribute to those ancestors of African origin and descent. So, welcome to this space. This is a conversation tonight, and we don't know exactly where we're going to go, but we want you to be part of it. And the way that you can do that, whether you are live streaming and watching it on Instagram or Facebook or YouTube, is you can be putting your questions, your comments in the chat. And especially those questions. We've got a great team that you can't see, Chris and Milan, who are here with us. They are going to be curating those questions, bringing them into this space here. And after everyone has had a chance to share, we are going to hear from you what those questions, and I'll pose those questions. So please be thinking as you're listening. Please be adding those questions as we're going, and we will get to them in the second half of this time together. So tonight we have four guests with us. We have Shad, who is a recording artist, and he's actually hanging out in Alberta right now, and we're glad to have him for the first part of this conversation. We have Debbie King, who's our elected school board trustee, and she'll be speaking to us around education. We have Janice Bartley, who's the executive director of Foodpreneur Lab. She's going to be speaking to us about entrepreneurship. And we hope that we have Josephine Dennis, Director of Curatorial Services and Initiatives at BAND, the Black Artist Network Dialogue. And she's just caught trying to make her way here. So we are mindful of her as she's traveling, and we'll be getting to her towards the end. So I'm going to begin by inviting Shad to speak. But before I do, Shad, I'm going to share a little bit about you, though many people do know about you. And I'm going to say, as the proud member for Parkdale High Park, that our first connection was actually through the work of Romero House, which supports refugees right here in Parkdale High Park. Both of us volunteering in that space and learning deeply from newcomers that were arriving and from the Romero House community about what community means. So welcome to you. And to those who don't know Shad, Shad is a Juno Award-winning rapper, a a veteran of Canadian music scene for over 20 years now. He's got 5 albums that have been shortlisted for the Polaris Music Prize for Canadian Album of the Year. That is the most shortlisted nominations of any artist in the prize's history. It's pretty impressive. And he's also been the host of CBC's flagship programs like Q and the Peabody and Emmy award winning documentary series Hip Hop Evolution. And he's taught courses. I'm so glad to hear that because I want your wisdom to be passed on at the University of Toronto, at Wilfrid Laurier, and the University of Alberta. And just
Yeah,
for those watching, what we did say to folks is come and share heart, mind, whatever you'd like. We want to know what Black excellence looks like in your field, and also what ongoing challenges there are. So take it away, Shad.
yeah. Thank you. Thanks for having me to join you. It's just pleasure, as you said, to be connected first and foremost, just through community, just real grassroots, regular neighborhood stuff. And so yeah, happy to be here just to share about Black excellence, and some other things as I see it, um, as it relates to my world, which is music. And within music, more specifically hip hop. But we just have so much to celebrate when it comes to music, um, in terms of Black excellence. You could start in the present day with Drake, who is arguably the biggest star in the world. He holds many records actually, for streams and all sorts of things. Everybody knows that. The Weeknd is not far behind him. Daniel Caesar, K Tronada. These are recent Grammy Award winners. But one thing I like to highlight when it comes to Black excellence is behind Drake is an organization called OVO, because Drake was not supported by the Canadian music industry initially, right? So in terms of the Black excellence there, it's like that management team, that whole organization as well. There's the excellence in the craft and the artistry, but also the brilliance and the imagination and the business savvy and the grit and the determination it takes to launch an international superstar like that. Daniel Caesar is the exact same thing. Two young Black men, uh, up in the, I think it was Ajax area, started managing him
Mm-hmm.
and bypassed the entire Canadian music industry and turned him into a global superstar with their savvy musically and their savvy in terms of business. So these are the kinds of things I love to highlight during Black History Month, because we know who Drake is, we know who The Weeknd is, we know who Daniel Caesar is, and we know that they're great. And it's important that we celebrate their artistry, but there's actually a lot more brilliance to it that we don't always know or always celebrate. And then in terms of Canadian hip hop, because I'm just a little bit of a history buff when it comes to that stuff, one thing most Canadians don't know is that Toronto has one of the oldest hip hop scenes in the world. Um, I traveled hosting the series Hip Hop Evolution. It's all about the history of hip hop. I traveled to Atlanta. I traveled to Miami.
Mm-hmm.
Toronto has a longer history with hip hop than those cities because they had their own local cultures. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
if you think about Toronto culture and New York culture, New York is where hip hop was born. Toronto has a very similar culture, and there was a similar ingredients in the soil. And if you talk about immigration from Jamaica, the first major DJs, hip hop DJs in New York, were from the Caribbean. So like that culture of the block parties and the big sound systems, which is really integral to hip hop, that was happening in Toronto at the same time. So that's a history that we have that we don't celebrate enough. We think of ourselves, even in the Drake Kendrick battle, as outsiders to hip hop. They're not like us. Toronto has an older hip hop scene than Los Angeles. Ask
Okay.
anybody in Los Angeles. They weren't listening to hip hop in the 80s. They weren't doing hip hop early in the 80s, right? So that's stuff I like to highlight. And then I always like to talk about outside of hip hop because we're so much more than that, right? R&B, jazz, Oscar Peterson,
Mm-hmm.
classical, opera. But my favorite story of all is the fabulous Bohe brothers. Very few people know about these brothers that lived in New Brunswick for a time. This is, I want to say, late 1800s, but they popularized the banjo internationally. They were so great at the banjo that the British royalty invited them over. They taught. So these are Black Canadians that were involved with popularizing banjo music internationally. Our contributions are just, they are, yes, they are Drake and The Weeknd, and but they're far beyond that as well. Um, what else can I say? Okay, in terms of challenges, well,
Mhm.
one thing is sharing stories like some of the stories that I just shared, right? Which is why I think Black History Month is still important and necessary, because so many of our contributions and even our existence, like for example, talking about the history of hip hop in Toronto, it's like even our existence sometimes is ignored or forgotten, right? So the importance of sharing those stories, and not to mention our contributions well outside of hip hop and behind the scenes, as well as executives, as professionals in the music industry. So that's a challenge, and that's something that we have to continue to do. Um, the last piece I want to talk about is locally. So when I think about the area I live in, I'm just a little bit outside of the High Park, Parkdale, but I'm right, around there. And I run into another artist, Sean Leon, a rapper in our neighborhood, who has written for Daniel Caesar. He's also written for Kanye West. He's done amazing things. So many artists. Phoenix Pagliacci is one that I collaborate with a lot, also lives up in our area. And when I think of our area as well, I think of all the venues that are so important
Mhm.
um, to music and to Black music. Venues like Great Hall that host some important nights. So there's a lot to be proud of, even locally, in terms of Black music, and in terms of challenges. To me, the big headline challenge over all of it, there was an article that was put together, I think by Vice magazine, but don't quote me on that. But they went to tourism uh, in Toronto, and they asked someone to estimate Drake's value to Toronto in dollars. And their estimate was $400 million annually. And the first question that came to mind for me was the communities that started this music that Drake makes, that Drake participates in, that is being exported to the world and is branded. Toronto is branding through Drake.
Mhm.
I don't think they're seeing much of that money, much of that economic benefit, which is an age old story. So when I think about challenges, I think about that challenge. How can we ensure, and it's not, to me, it's not at all a handout, it's fair. It's the
Yeah.
fair value of what our excellence, creative excellence in this case, musical excellence in this case, what is our fair share of that, right? Shouldn't be concentrated in the hands of even one person from our community, let alone from all sorts of hands from outside our community, right? So when I think of challenges, that is top of mind for me. How do we make sure that, and again, it's not a handout, it's actually our fair share of
Mhm.
like booming, blossoming city, this that's been branded with our creativity. If you think about Drake being used to brand Toronto, it's branded with our creativity, right? And that's what I that's what I think about. I'm sorry, I'm a bit over time,
No,
but
that's amazing, Shad. Thank you for that. What I heard in that was that creative excellence is a shared endeavor, that you see almost like the iceberg effect of the tip of it is the artist at there, but underneath it is this incredible community that lifts that individual and helps that and supports. And then conversely, do we see that community partaking in their fair share of what comes from that, of the resources and of the rewards of it.
yeah, yeah,
um,
yeah, exactly. Can we be
so
mindful of how, of the mechanisms that allow for those benefits to, really be shared with that whole ecosystem? As you said, it's always a whole ecosystem, not to mention time. takes 20, 30 years to produce an artist that can break through like that, right? So
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Shed. I have a feeling like that's going to be a bit of a theme as we, speak to our other leaders on the panel here, because so just from what I know of them, they're all in this space of building each other and the communities that they serve up, and and it is a shared endeavor. So thank you for starting us off with that. I really appreciate that. I really appreciate you. I know you're going to jump off to go do a concert very soon, and those folks are very, very lucky. But stick around as long as you can, and thank you. Yeah. And Debbie, I'm going to turn to you next if I can. Um, Debbie and I have known each other for a while now, most recently as electeds, but even before that in the community. And Debbie serves as the elected school board trustee for Parkdale High Park, and has been really a champion for children, for Black student success at schools, and a number of things that I think she might share with us. I'm going to give you a little bit of a shout out here, Debbie, in terms of your bio, so that those who don't have the pleasure of getting to work with you, like I do, get to know you a little bit through these words. Debbie King is a parent, a community builder, a communications professional, and an athlete. You may not have known that about her, who was elected in 2022 as the TDSB trustee for Parkdale High Park. She's a first generation Canadian born and raised in Toronto, has lived in the riding for 18 years now, and is a founding member and co chair of the Black Student Success Committee. She's championed equity for the public education system. She's helped create safer school environments. And in fact, in 2021, her work was recognized by the Urban Alliance on Race Relations at their annual awards. Debbie currently serves chair of the Ontario School Boards Association of Black Trustee uh, uh, caucus that they have. And Debbie, I really in education spaces, so over to you.
Thank you so much, Alexa, for the introduction. And I'll start by saying Happy Black History Month to everybody here and everybody watching. Also, happy second annual Black Education Week. Really grateful to be able to share this space with everyone here and to share some insights on Black excellence in education. I am coming from the perspective of somebody who was raised in this public education system. I'm also a parent who now has a child in grade 11 in the Toronto District School Board. I have experiences in parent council leadership, and now, of course, in the elected role that Alexa mentioned, which really puts me at an intersection of both education and governance leadership. My responsibility as a trustee is to ensure that we are delivering a high quality public education system that is improving well-being for every student. And of course, that includes Black students. Before the province took over the TDSB and sidelined the trustee role, which is a whole other conversation, prior to that, I did spend quite a bit of time outside of the boardroom in the community, visiting our elementary schools, our secondary schools here in the ward, but also visiting schools right across the city. And especially during Black History Month, really wanting to participate and observe, what was happening in our school spaces during that time. And of course, this is a time where, we see the Black heroes and the prominent leaders are really given the spotlight. So it wouldn't be uncommon for me to be, walking down the halls in a school and to see a display, along the hallway that might feature Lincoln Alexander or Viola Desmond. I was speaking to my child yesterday. They had a Black History Month assembly, and I asked them, who did you talk about? What did you learn about? And they said Serena Williams, Muhammad Ali. Those were some of the people that were featured. And I've been in spaces where the Honorable Dr. Jean Augustine has visited and presented directly to students, which I think it's wonderful that she's still active and doing that as one of the people that we can credit for Black History Month here in Canada. So, of course, it's important for students to hear these stories that are a part of Canadian history. It's important for them to see folks that look like them, that share their skin color, their hair texture, their birthplace. See people that have really risen to prominence in their fields and really have those as emblems of Black excellence. But what I'm really coming to appreciate more, and I love that Shad used this language as well, is what precedes that. And to me, that's Black brilliance. And you use those words exactly, Shad, and my ears perked up when I heard you say that because it's obviously a bit of a theme that we're both on. But for me, that means how do we recognize the gifts, the knowledge, the worthiness, and the potential of Black students before they obtain those titles, before they are, what we would prescribe as achievements, right? When I do those school visits, it's interesting because I don't always see Black students in school council roles. I don't always see them on student senate or as student trustees. We've had a couple for sure who are incredible and who have done great work. But, it's not always a space where they choose to show their leadership for whatever reason. And it's not because they aren't leaders. So I think when I think about, Black brilliance, I think about how much of our responsibility is how we nurture, how we center, how we give platforms to Black students as they are right now, and then seeing what grows from that. And so much of our role as adults, I really believe, is getting out of the way for them and really allowing them to express themselves and to show us who they are and what that leadership is. So when we think about education, of course there are challenges, and we know that there are systemic ways that students, Black students, are silenced, are shut out, are suppressed. We've had all of the reports, we've had all of the discussions over many years. This goes back to me being a student in public school as well, whether it is being streamed into behavioral special education classes, whether it's being passed up on gifted opportunities and academic pathways, whether it's suspension, and the overrepresentation and over discipline of Black students that marginalizes them right out of those learning spaces. Those are some of the, really obvious and documented ways. But what I've also seen and what I've also learned is the quiet ways
Mm.
that we get in the way of their learning and their thriving. Whether that is a Black girl shrinking, not stepping up, not speaking up, lest she be labeled as loud or combative. Whether it's the assimilation, kids that might find themselves in spaces where they feel in order to show up, they have to somehow, again, prescribe to, a certain way of looking or speaking or being in order to feel safe, in order to feel belonging, in order to feel and be included. We need to get out of the way of that. So when we talk about, what are the ongoing barriers? What are the things that need to change? I think about how we create spaces of joy and curiosity and safety and inclusion and really allow kids to shine. There is a wonderful document, and I know Alexa will know of this, but I really just want to take my last minute or so to speak about the Dreams Delayed report that was launched by the Ontario Human Rights Commission. about a year ago last year, or sorry, about a year ago now in March, because it does exactly that. It delivers a strategy and an action plan for how we address the systemic anti-Black racism in education. And it's broken up into different areas, but the one area that I really love and will highlight is the actions under student well-being.
Mm-hmm.
So it's talking about how we create affirmative education spaces, how we create affirmative and empowering curriculum, how we target and recruit Black educators and education workers so that kids have somebody that they can relate to, that shares that lived experience, that helps reflect, who they are and what they aspire to be. How we expand the Black graduation coach program so that we're helping kids, we're helping them navigate the system, we're helping them find that pathway to whatever it is, whether it's entrepreneurship, skilled trades, college, university, something else. We want to take the limits off what they can do and who they are. And, to me as adults, that's one of the biggest responsibilities that we have, is really just seeing and appreciating that brilliance so it can grow into that excellence that we get to talk about and celebrate later.
Thank you, Debbie. What I found particularly um, powerful and sort of thought provoking for me was whether we were talking about music or we were talking about education, we were talking about spaces that were safe and where curiosity and joy could grow, right? And how do we create those spaces? So I'm glad that you lifted up the Human Rights Commission report. Um, and I think that feel free, others of you on this as we're going, if there's a favorite book or a report or something that you want us to be mindful of, that we can continue our journey of educating ourselves and learning more and becoming this vision of a community that I think so many of us yearn to be, where every one of us can thrive and feel tremendously of value for who we are. So deep appreciation. Thanks, Debbie.
Thank you.
I'm going to turn now to Janice Bartley, who's going to take us into a very delicious space of foodpreneurship. This is entrepreneurship in the food spaces, the restaurant spaces, and more. And so, before you do, Janice, I want to say that we first met. We all have a Parkdale High Park connection. It was Griezel's opening day of a restaurant in Bloor West, on Bloor Street, that we first met and had an incredible sandwich. And it was such an exciting day that I thought I really need to know more about how this space is forming in order to give these creative chefs the opportunity to share their gifts like we had shared with us that day. But before I let you speak, I'm going to share a little bit more about you so that those who are on this call get a sense of the real work that you're doing, the empowerment that you're bringing to the spaces you're in. So, as a Black woman and an award winning entrepreneur in your own right, Janice Bartley is the founder and executive director of the nonprofit Foodpreneur Lab. And Foodpreneur Lab was created to tackle the systemic barriers head on, to pioneer new approaches to creating access for those who historically have been prevented from fully presenting and participating in the food sector. Through the Black Economic System Fund, Ecosystem Fund, her project supports and provides opportunities for 200 Black food entrepreneurs over 4 years. And her personal mission is to level that playing field, to open doors in underserved communities for would-be and for established food entrepreneurs. So, with that, I want you to take us into that world and share with us what Black excellence looks like to you, and where we still have to go on that journey.
Thank you so much. Happy Black History Month to everyone as well. And to Shad and Debbie, thank you for those insights because they're so relatable. Um, so for me, the question comes back to what does Black excellence look like in my field and the lived experience? And Black excellence is building what we've never been given. And as a founder, I didn't inherit infrastructure, I had to build it. And that looked like writing my first grant proposal without mentorship, creating policies from scratch, securing partnerships through persistence and not proximity. Black excellence is also access creation. It's not just about me sitting at the table, it's about building a larger table and ensure that I have representation by hiring staff that look like us or within the communities that we serve, mentoring emerging leaders, and opening doors intentionally. Black excellence is also strategic leadership. So as an executive director, I lead with vision, governance, compliance, and community accountability all at once. And that looks like balancing funder expectations with grassroots realities through without compromising integrity. And that's very important. Black excellence is also cultural intelligence. I don't have to code switch because I can show up with authenticity. Where I show up in how I run my meetings, I share my lived experience, and my and professionalism can coexist. Black excellence is also financial stewardship. Black leadership includes strong fiscal management and sustainable growth. And that looks like managing budgets responsibly and also diversifying funding streams and ensuring that you're building reserves for sustainability. Black excellence is also resilience without bitterness. And what do I mean by that? We navigate systemic barriers and we still have to lead with grace. Sometimes it's being overlooked for opportunities, but still continuing to deliver excellence regardless of the outcomes. Black excellence is community centered innovation. Our solutions are culturally grounded and community informed. And we do that by designing programs that reflect the realities of our Black entrepreneurs, or youth, or Black families, and Black food entrepreneurs as well. Black excellence is representation in decision making spaces, sitting on boards, advisory tables, executive councils where policies are shaped, and
Mhm.
advocating for equity clauses in funding agreements. Black excellence is also refusing a scarcity mindset. We collaborate instead of competing for crumbs. And we ensure that we look at partnering with other Black led organizations rather than duplicating efforts. Black excellence is also intergenerational impact. What I build is not just for today, it's for legacy. And so by creating programs that equip young food Black entrepreneurs, I'm trying to leave a legacy that will lead into the next 10 to 20 years. But having said all that, let's talk about the barriers that come with this as well. Um, the first barrier that everybody talks about is access to capital. And we hear this all the time, regardless of sector. Black entrepreneurs still receive disproportionately lower funding, and we're being asked to do more with less. We're also being asked for more documentation, more proof, and more validation than our counterparts at times. And we see other organizations that have been built to support us, like the Black Opportunity Fund, and where their whole mandate is to support Black communities across Canada, and they do this by mobilizing long-term capital, philanthropy to address systemic underinvestment. We also look at a barrier that's the over scrutiny and under trust. And what do I mean by that? Black leaders are often over evaluated and under supported. And
Mm.
so what we see, it comes out in micromanaging funding relationships or questioning the competency despite the results. And so we really have to lean in that and push back at times to say that, okay, this is our wheelhouse and this is what we've done well.
Mhm.
One of the barriers as well is the wage and leadership gaps. Black professionals remain underrepresented in executive leadership. And we see the few Black women that are in executive spaces. And, this led to the creation of the mandate with Black North Initiative as well. We also look at systemic biases in education, which Debbie just spoke
Hmm.
to, and how they're disproportionately streamed and disciplined. There's
Yeah.
also barriers with health inequities, where Black communities experience disparities when it comes to maternal health and mental health access. And again, the Black community has tried to pivot and lean into that by creating the Black Health Alliance. And what that does is it addresses systemic barriers with regard to equitable health outcomes, whether it's through research, advocacy, or community engagement. There's also procurement barriers where Black owned businesses struggle to access large government and corporate contracts, lack of insider networks or transparency in procurement processes. So we really have to ensure that we're showing up in these spaces and as a reminder that we exist and we have the right to participate as well. As Shad said, we want to ensure it's fair. I think that's the common denominator to make sure everything is fair, not a handout, but the fairness. And then lastly, which I've spoken to many founders, many EDs, burnout from being the only one.
Mm.
And that is the emotional labor and the constant representation that takes a toll. Being expected to educate colleagues on anti-Black racism while carrying executive responsibilities is is burdensome at times. And sometimes you feel like you're recreating the same wheel, but in different conversations and different areas. At the same time, I think it's a weighted responsibility that we carry. I always say, you know what, our role is to inform and educate. Um, but over time, we always hope that we've moved the needle. And one of the things that we talk about, or we ask the question, well, what needs to change? And one of the things that we say is that we have to move from statements to structural change. Equity cannot live in a mission statement; it lives in budgets and policy. And so, what needs to happen? We need to see more multi-year funding commitments, more transparent hiring and promotion data,
Hmm.
um, equitable procurement policies, more Black representation in decision making roles, and measurable, accountable frameworks.
Hmm.
And so the last thing I want to leave is a phrase that two phrases, which the one that really struck me said, diversity is a metric, equity is a strategy, inclusion is culture, but investment is commitment.
Mm.
And in that final statement, I will say Black excellence is not rare. It is often under resourced. The brilliance already exists.
Thank you, Janice. Thank you so much for taking us through that and helping us understand um, just how much that those spaces, the wheels have to be reinvented in those spaces. And I hear that that burnout even in Black History Month. This one moment, but it's supposed to be year long, and it needs to be stretched, and it needs to be in every space. And I also hear in that, as an MPP, the importance of policy and legislation that creates those spaces of justice and fairness, that rights some of the wrongs of the past, that ensures that our funding is equitable and is truly investing, as you just said, and not a tokenism of any kind, but uh, because what I think I also heard you say, and I fully agree with, because Black excellence is not rare, and we are all missing out, right? This world is poor for that. So thank you to the three of you so much for the conversation that we've had so far. I'm going to lift up Josephine at Bend, even though she's not able to make it tonight, because if you haven't seen their space, you really do need to check them out online. But then when they get their beautiful new home on Brock Avenue built, you have to run down to Band. Band is the the Black Artists Network in Dialogue, and they have been committed to institutional transformation that serves artists and the public by creating these really effective networks, not just here in Toronto, not just across Canada, but globally. Where they, there's this continuous study, continuous learning, continuous celebration of Black visual arts. And so, while we're not getting to see Josephine on the call tonight, I did not want to go without giving anyone on this in the audience who hasn't encountered band yet an opportunity to be deeply enriched by the work that they're doing there. So we do have a few questions for both for Janice and for Debbie. Um, One of the questions is for any of the panelists. How can the local, the community, right? We've talked about schools and art spaces and businesses, and even a little bit about government. How what is the community? How does the community better nurture Black leadership and creativity? Don't know if either of you have thoughts on that space. I know community was a big focus of Shad's piece too, right?
Debbie, you can
I'll
go.
jump. Yeah, I'll jump in only because I'm fresh on the advocacy space right now, and I literally just got off a call that was a phone zap that provided an opportunity for community members, parents, those that are invested in public education, as we all should be, to literally get on the phone and make phone calls to MPPs and let them know. I talked about the Dreams Delayed report. I touched on a little bit of what the school takeovers have looked like. Um, but really, what we're seeing from that is folks like myself who were inspired and encouraged to come into this leadership role so that we could represent the lived experiences, the interests of kids that we know are having disparities in outcome, and families and communities that need to and want to be a bigger part of the system, have their voice heard, be participants, and being sidelined as a trustee. I'm certainly serving everybody, but there's a representation that comes with that that's also being pushed aside. There
Mhm.
is the work that we do to advance those policies that you've talked about, the programs that you've talked about, to push for the kind of investment that you both acknowledge, and that is all getting pushed aside. So when we look at, what can we do locally, I would encourage everyone, reach out to Alexa, reach out to me. I will let you know how you can get on phones with the folks that are your representatives, who have been elected, who are representing you as taxpayers, as voters, as family members. We all have somebody who's benefiting from public education in our families, in our networks, just in society as a whole. They are accountable and they need to hear from us, that this is a value and that public education is a value, and we want it to operate in a way where it's funded and staffed and growing in a way that it is supporting our students in all the way that we describe, so that they can get to the point where they're participating in the post-secondary opportunities that Shad's involved in, that they can pursue the kind of pathways that Janice offers or that Josephine offers. So that's a very tangible way that we as citizens can get involved, use our voices, and push for that kind of investment and change.
Thanks, Debbie. And I want to go over to Janice, and before we go over there, I do think I want to add to that to really encourage people. I had no idea until I became an elected member of provincial parliament, the extent to which really your voice really does matter. We do take into consideration how many people have emailed and phoned, and how many people show up and fill the galleries on any one day. And I can tell you the government side even more so, when their MPPs get phone calls, they go to caucus and they go, hey, boss, we got to do something about this. We're all hearing, right? So for sure, the education piece right now is very worrisome. So is OSAP, right? OSAP is a place where is largely going to affect people with low income. Who may second guess whether they should go to university or college at all because those grants are no longer there. And again, that piece of someone opting out because we didn't provide what they needed to thrive is really worrisome. So we have saveosap.ca as another campaign, a way that community can get involved. So I'm really glad for the question. And I want to throw it over to you, Janice, in terms of your thoughts on how does the community participate in nurturing Black excellence?
So thank you. So one of the things that when I hear community, it may have a different meaning in my sphere, which
Yeah.
is we create community within the food entrepreneurs that we have our first initial contact with. And so what we intentionally have done is when you come into Foodpreneur Lab, there our philosophy is there is no reason for you to leave because the whole idea is we've put systems and programs in place that allow for capacity building, which is what Debbie mentioned earlier. So you can start with an idea and you can scale up, and then you can look at exporting and the next level and the next level. And I think the true definition of community is creating and developing pathways because that allows for continued engagement. And so that's the first layer. And then the second piece to that is when you have that, your own community starts to support you because by definition and example, you've shown what's possible. And
Mm-hmm.
it really speaks to whether it's in education or food entrepreneurship. One of the things I've learned as a Black woman is they really need to see us in these roles to fully understand what's possible. And not only that, but they also need to hear us speak on panels and platforms because all they ever hear are the high stories. They never hear of the lows, the challenges. And I think that is equally as important because we all have a story to tell that's been challenging. No road is ever smooth. There might be bits and pieces of smooth parts, but there's the bumpy parts. There's going to school and not paying your fees and wondering when are they going to pull you out of the classroom. But your commitment and perseverance will not allow you to cop out because of that challenge. And of course, I'm speaking from experience, but but that resonates with young people and entrepreneurs as well because what I've learned in the 30 plus years I've been doing it is you're really building relationships. Whether you're selling a service or a widget, it doesn't matter. It's what when you connect with people, you have their attention. And it is an example of taking the time to listen and perhaps sharing a story or providing a solution, either or. But you're building community while you're doing that unknowingly because in them, they now know, oh, here's somebody I could reach out to in the event of dot, dot, dot. So that for me is how expansive community is.
Thank you. I think I resonate with that so much because um, everything I've ever everything I've ever done is relationship, right? Like it's we are nurtured in the family of relationships, the community, and we are truly changed. I don't think there's that many people's minds who are changed when they read a book the same way that when they meet someone and hear a story. And are transformed by that exchange of experiences, right? So to hear that
Yeah.
big part of it.
I'll throw in a quick thing I always ask
Yeah.
entrepreneurs or food entrepreneurs. I always say to them, "Have you ever bought an inferior product and why?" And nine times out of ten, it's about the relationship that they have with that person who is selling that product. They know it's not the best, but they really like the person, their integrity, the brand, what it stands for, etc. And so they'll say, "You know what? I'm going to stick with this." That is the definition of true relationships, where sometimes it's not the best of the best, but it's good enough to be the best for where you are at that time.
Yeah, because relationships have value to them as much as the
Absolutely.
actual product and that's yeah, I think that's really important. You know, we are talking about a world right now that is so much more transactional and metric minded and fails to take into consideration the relationships so often that got people where they were, you know. Um,
I can jump in and I can add to that if you'd like.
please.
Because when we talk about these affirmative spaces, Black affirmative spaces in education, we have a wonderful example at the Toronto District School Board with the Center of Excellence for Black Student Achievement,
Mm,
which is an entire space with Black leadership, programming for Black students. And I've had the opportunity to speak to a number of the students that have been enrolled in the leadership programs there. And it's incredible to see when you walk into this space, and there are students that are all, in this case, high achieving, they're aspiring for leadership opportunities, and they are together in a place where their Blackness, their
mhm,
identity, and their academic pursuits get to live in one place. They don't have to separate them. And they'll often ask me for advice about, thinking about their futures. What's my advice for them? And one of the things I often say is, you right now have this network. You have this incredible network around you in the mentors, the educators that are leading the program, the peer mentors that are there, but in each other. And often at this point they're in their last year of high school, so they're going to be going off to in different directions, different post-secondary, and I encourage them, number one, to stay in contact with each other, because
yeah.
these are the relationships, right, that are going
Mhm,
to help you.
mhm,
But number two, to find or create those spaces where they go as
yeah,
well, so they
yeah.
continue to grow that network and have those relationships, because they absolutely will be either the people that you are calling on for moral support, for that ear to hear your story, who understands
Mhm,
what's going on when you hit those lows that Janice mentioned, somebody who's going to affirm and tell you, this stuff is not in your mind, when you're encountering those microaggressions,
yeah.
and somebody who's going to, be a reference, or point you into a direction of an opportunity, right? Those are all the things that those relationships nurture.
Thank you both. I'm going to try to get us through two more questions before we wrap up. Um, this one that was passed to me, it is actually about hope, but it starts a little. It's a weighty question. It just says, yeah, but with President Trump in the White House and Elon Musk opening up X to more racist posts, and so many funding cuts here in our own province of Ontario, what gives you hope? Because this work feels really heavy right now.
Um, so that's a very good question, and that's a question that I wrestled with in early 2024 when there was the tariffs and everything that was being turned upside down.
Hmm.
And after a few minutes of sort of contemplating, okay, so what is this impact going to have? I immediately realized, hey, actually, this is an opportunity, because when I look in the food space, what were we lacking? Cultural identity and representation. So if you're not importing stuff from the US, trust me, you're going to need to come somewhere to find products to put on the shelf. Voila, there was the opportunity. So I guess hope really is the ability to look at a situation and recognize the downside, but to sift through and take out the positive nuggets and work with it, because that's just life. You know, every day we wake up to a challenge, and you might get, and if you have this, celebrate it. Let me tell you, you may have a day where everything went perfectly. Take it and run with it. Okay. Celebrate it. Tell your friends. Okay. So that, to Debbie's point, when you have those moments when you feel like
Hmm.
you just got sucked down the drain by a vacuum, they can say to you, but hey, remember you were able to
Mm.
achieve X, Y, and Z in the darkest of moments when you didn't think it was possible. And then the other thing about hope is, and from my own personal experience, what when I was looking at Foodpreneur Lab, I had a vision. Okay. And that's very important. You curate that vision as you go, you tweak it over the years. And like any entrepreneur, I too questioned, is this even possible? But there's one thing I've always lived by is the worst thing you could do is die with a dream inside you not executed, because I always say, what's the worst could happen? And then I always say, well, if not you, then who? If you're not going to invest in yourself, then who do you think is going to invest in you if you don't even believe in yourself? And so, life is a crapshoot sometimes, and sometimes you hit lucky seven, and sometimes you don't. But you don't not go to the table. You still got to stick your neck out and take a chance and live your best life, because
Yeah.
when you get older, that reflection valley that you go through, you don't want it to be about missed opportunities. You want to be able to tell the stories that you took a leap of faith
Mm-hmm.
and you tried it and it worked, and this is where I was. Or I tried it and it didn't work, and I pivoted and this is where I was. Because I firmly believe you wind up where you're supposed to be.
Thank you, Janice. Wow. That's Debbie.
Yeah, two things come to mind for me. What gives me hope? Spirituality is hugely grounding for me, and I think that's something that's common among so many Black communities.
Mm-hmm.
I was just at a service on the weekend, and I was paying attention to the lyrics in one of the hymns that says, paraphrasing, but God is above all positions and power. And for me, as somebody who's not necessarily doctrinally religious, but definitely a
Mm-hmm.
believer, and has a reverence for creation and believes in a higher power, I can always come back to something above what is happening in this time, in this moment on earth.
Mm-hmm.
And knowing that there are other things that I can tap into in that way. And then the second, for me, the hope is in the fight. It's always been the fight. We're talking about Black History Month. We're talking about, all of these leaders and achievements. Nobody achieved any of that with it handed to them.
Right.
And this is where we have to do the work to understand those stories. And this is the challenge for everybody, because there was fierce, fierce opposition, fierce moments of unsafety for folks, of harm, so much
Mm-hmm.
that people endured to continue working for the liberties that we have now, whether it's in housing and education, in rights to vote, in anything, in ownership. Right? None of that was handed over. It's all come from organizing, from just pure sheer grit, and not wanting to die with those dreams inside of us, and those untapped kind of possibilities. So I always take inspiration in what has happened before, the shoulders I'm on now, and what I see happening in real time in this moment around me.
Thank you. Thank you to both of you. I'm so grateful for the conversation tonight. Um, and I'm so well aware of that last thing that you said, Debbie, that the powerful have never handed over anything. You know, I'm in my Queens Park office, and if I walk down the hall to the chamber, it is, with the exception of Lincoln Alexander and Kathleen Wynne, every one of the photos is a very homogeneous, white male on the walls. And I walk into the chamber and I stand there, and I'm aware that there was a period of time where I was not allowed to speak in that chamber, right? And a period where I wasn't allowed to vote. Um, and I am reminded that exactly what you said, that I was carried up by the people whose shoulders I stand on. And I think there's a responsibility in each and every one of us, um, to look, around the spaces and see who is not there, and what do we do. Um, And you guys have both given us so many ways in, both the heart ways, the head ways, the the things that we can read, the opportunities that we can have in the communities when we're out, and making choices about even where we shop and spend our money and invest, um, and what music we're listening to. As Shad was giving us so many wonderful choices. So thank you. I know that this is the beginning of the conversation, not the end, even though it's the end of our evening together. Um, and I just want to end by offering both of you my thanks, my heartfelt thanks that you gave an hour of your time in the middle of your busy lives and the deep calling that each one of you has. Um, it is not lost on me that there's a cost to that, and that we, the listeners, are benefiting from that. So thank you, and I add a little prayer that this gift that is this conversation seeds many more conversations and is part of that bending of the moral arc towards justice. So thank you very much tonight.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much. Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.